together on one big shopping trip, and we're like, all right, here's our list of materials we need. We're going to look in every single fabric shop in the LA Fashion District and see if we can find something.
And then we couldn't find any golden trim.
No trim in all of the Fashion District.
No.
It was ridiculous.
And so then we found a website in Turkey that made it, and we special ordered it. It took like a month, but we got it.
Homeland Security certified this terrorist-free.
And then sometimes you'll get on these costumes and you really want to do it, and you search and you search and you search, and it turns out it doesn't exist because the designer like one-off wove some costume materials, like those two beautiful costumes you have up there in that top corner. Those fabrics don't exist, which is another huge headache.
Sorry.
And like what the pilots we were mentioning is finding the things that you need. You might not have to make them yourself. Any comments on that?
It's just really useful to just stay on the boards. Like, it's not just pilot things. Like our buckles. You see these buckles? We did not make these. There's a person who did a run of a whole bunch of buckles, so all of the buckles are uniform, they're really high quality, and we all know that they're going to look really nice at the end. So rather than trying to sculpt something out of clay ourselves, which might have worked, we already have something that looks awesome.
And looks way better than anything I could have ever done.
So we're very happy about that.
Yeah.
And patterns. If you are going to sew it yourself, there really aren't any patterns out there that are perfect for what we're looking for. There are a lot of things that are close, and you kind of have to go shopping around through all the pattern books. And like, for example, there's a little diagram of ours. We found McCall's pattern for the shirt and jacket just for the collar and certain pants patterns. But of course, all of them had to be altered into whatever this is. And once you get the patterns, you can get an idea of how much fabric you need. But you also will probably wind up drafting some of your own, or finding a friend, or making a new friend who can do it for you. And the last thing is, with the Rebel Legion, because of our standard of quality, don't bring in Halloween costumes. If you can buy it in a Halloween store, it's not a good deal. We got a picture of our beautiful Jessica there and a Halloween costume, and you can see just how much better Jessica's looks than what you can buy in a store. I think that's the end of that slide.
I miss shoes.
Shoes. Oh, you can talk about shoes.
Shoes can be a challenge. I mean, like for these, we all three of us have different boots, but you basically need to find something that looks remotely like what you have. Like, there is different, always check the standards before you go and get your shoes, because some will say you cannot have any decorations on your boots. And
or
if you
no heels, or your heels have to be like under a certain height or something like that.
Or like for Leia, you don't want shiny vinyl go-go boots. Like, they're really easy to find. Actually, good Leia boots are very difficult to find. I was very surprised, but you can get them. You just have to look a little bit harder.
One important thing, I'm going to jump in on this, is also that you want to make sure that your shoes are comfortable.
Yes.
I mean, when I see these girls walking around in 5-inch heels here, I give them so much respect because that's painful. I mean, personally, I love finding costumes that have, just flat boots because they're the easiest to put insoles in, and they're easiest to, when you're on a convention running around for 5 or 10 hours, your feet gotta last. I mean, never, if you can find boots that are 100% accurate but they're most uncomfortable things on the planet,
Go for a little less accuracy.
go for a little less accurate, Just try to make sure that you're comfortable and you're not killing yourself in the process.
Last thing you want to do is twist your ankle in the middle of a troop.
Yes.
You're good? Yeah, let's get it out.
All right.
Okay, so now that you have your materials, and you have your boots, and your patterns, and all that, you're going to want to think about, how am I going to put this together? And my thing I've learned so much over the last couple of years, you will love yourself more if you make it first in cheap fabric. A mock-up, as it were. And I skipped a point, so I'm going to go back. So we keep mentioning our forums, and we're not the only forums out there, and there are other people who are posting tutorials, but the Rebel Legion and Sunrider Base are a wealth of information. If you want to do a Star Wars costume, chances are someone else has done it already, and either you can track down that one person who's done your super obscure costume and ask for advice, and they will probably be willing to give it to you, because really it's a costuming community. We want to help everybody make their awesome costumes together.
And then you can have awesome fun with us.
Yeah.
And so back to the pattern mock-ups. It should be a rule that pattern mock-up photos are always terrible, but that is a couple of photos. We got really colorful fabric. It's whatever you got in the fabric bin. Test it out to make sure it fits, to make sure it looks good on you. And take it in, add some more. then when you get cut into your really nice fabric, you won't cry because it doesn't fit you. And I think, Lisa, you should talk about those costumes that I'm going to throw under the bus there. About how
I'm
together.
happy to throw my old costumes under the bus because let's face it, oftentimes when we start out, our costumes are pretty terrible. You got to start somewhere. So we'll start on the left side of the screen, which is my very first Jedi costume. That thing was never ever formable, so don't worry about it. I made it with fashion tape and safety pins. I was in college. I didn't have a sewing machine. Didn't really know what I was doing. I just found some discount fabric and said, all right, I'm going to like draw some chalk lines on some fabric and cut it out, and it looked surprisingly good. But I don't recommend it because that will not last very long. It didn't get sewn together until some of my fellow fans in Cleveland were like, sweetie, we're teaching you how to use a sewing machine right now. And then it got sewn together and it was, still not great, but at least it wasn't going to fall apart. Move on to costume 2 after I learned the please don't fashion tape it together lesson. That was my very first Padme costume, 100% hand stitched. Took me a whole semester. I probably should have been doing my homework. But, you can get a lot done that way. It's a lot cheaper than going out and buying a sewing machine if you have the time on your hands. And the pattern that was stamped on it, I made a stamp out of a potato. It was very jury-rigged all around. But it didn't look too bad, all things considered. Another college budget costume.
Again, doesn't stay together very well.
It's definitely not a highly recommended, but can be done. I figured, if back in the 1800s they sewed everything by hand, that I could probably pull it off too. They were way better at it than I was. So then we move on to a costume like the Senatorial Leia, which is one of my favorites, if only because it is so comfortable and so easy to make. You can do that without hand-stitching anything.
The collar a little
The
bit.
collar, if you're like adding hooks and eyes,
Yeah.
and
It's
You can-
essentially no.
very, very little hand-stitching involved. It's 4 pieces of fabric. It is like wearing pajamas. It is awesome. I highly recommend it.
And then these last handmaidens is about 50-50. When you get up to some points, you see where places you really should be hand sewing, and there are other places that are much better if you machine sew. And the more you sew, the more you get a handle on what that is, and it's good to not be afraid of either, because it really helps putting together the whole costume. Again, we like to help each other. Sometimes we throw armor and costuming parties. So if you keep an eye on our boards, and sometimes we say, hey, let's all get together and sew. And that's a good time to have somebody help you with a costume piece, or have somebody teach you how to make a costume piece. It's a really good resource to have. Good?
So we're going to move on and talk to some kind of specific costumes in the Legion. So I'm going to turn it over to John, who will be talking about our wonderful, brightly oranged guys, our Rebel pilots, including our X-Wing pilots.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
My name's John. I'm an orange pilot, walking, talking safety film. Makes us really easy to spot in a crowd. If you guys were here on yesterday and on Friday, we had a lot more of us walking around, and you can see that when you're in a group, we do look pretty impressive together. We can stand toe-to-toe with a squad of stormtroopers in any photo op and come out looking pretty good. Let me first off and say that if you're scared of orange, that's no reason not to do a pilot. We have A-wings who are in green, Y-wings who are in gray, B-wings who are in red. We have the prequel pilots, the N-1 starfighters. There's
Which
2
is
versions of that.
still
And
orange,
there's-
but it's
and-
not that orange.
burnt orange. And then there's even clone pilots. So if you are a die-hard armor fanatic, all you have to do is your standard clone armor is swap out the chest box and a helmet, and boom, you've got a clone pilot. And that's nice because that's actually a dual costume for the 501st and for the Rebel Legion. This is what they call a middle-of-the-road costume. It's not the easiest. It's not the hardest. There are lots of help out there on the Rebel boards. One nice thing about here in Southern California is there are 4 Rebel Legion, what they call costume judges, that judge your submissions against the standards. 2 of them are sitting up here, Rachel and I. And And so we're not costume Nazis. We believe in something that looks more accurate. It needs to look real. Then, it needs to have 12 stitches in a certain place. There are lots of pieces to this particular costume, and all the ones you see on the board, and we have a couple of the flyers up here that you can take them with you if you want. They're also on the table at our booth, F21. Those are the required costume standards. So you need to have all of those pieces. One of the nice things about our way of judging costumes is if you submit a costume and say you're missing the code cylinders and the pockets, or maybe you're missing the pocket altogether, we don't deny you outright. We contact you and we say, you've done a really good job, but there's one thing we're missing, or maybe you can adjust this thing, and then we give you some time and work with you so you have some time to make that correction if you so want to get that formal designation. We're really lucky here in California because we're the state that Lucasfilm resides in. Lucasfilm likes pilots, so we get to do some fun stuff. For example, Quincy's one of our pilots. At Comic-Con last year, they contacted us, and we were their booth babes for the Comic-Con for their Blu-ray experience. We found out just how uncomfortable our booths can get over 5 days, and how ripe these suits can get as well. But there are unique opportunities, because it's one of the few costumes in the Revolution where you don't have to be a face character, but you can still exhibit some personality in that you can decorate your helmet in almost any way you want. There are still some standards for the helmets. It needs to look like it belongs in the movies, but this is my own original design. Our local squadron, Hazard Squadron, is actually might be the largest now in the Rebel Legion.
I think once these two ladies submit their costume, we'll be the largest in the Rebel Legion.
We have 34 pilots here in Southern California, which means that when we do these charity events or these publicity events, chances are we can field at least 1 to 2 of them, because our range is from Visalia all the way down to the border of Southern California, so we're pretty spread out.